Hello there, welcome to Dateline Abuja. I'm Gloria Umezuke. According to the Ministry of Water Resources, the Water Resources Bill is a wholesome legislation that is designed to put the sector in a more economically viable position to lead government's efforts to diversify the economy. But controversies on the actual intention of the bill is creating a clog in the wheel. We'll be looking at why the bill is generating so much controversy in our interview segment. But first, what are the stories that made the headlines within the week in the nation's capital? The Vice President, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, has asked African countries to begin to think of a world without oil and use its revenues from oil and gas to diversify and develop infrastructure and human capital. Speaking at the opening of the extraordinary session of the Council of Ministers of African Petroleum Producers Organization, Professor Osinbajo warned that oil and gas, which is a significant percentage of the budget in most African countries, may not be relevant in the global economies in the nearest future.
While oil and gas will continue to be critical to our revenue bases and our national economies, we must redouble our efforts to achieve the following. 1, to diversify our economies away from the dangerous overdependence. And 2, to ensure that we invest as much as is possible of today's current oil and gas revenues in the infrastructure and human capital that will underpin future economic growth and development.
The federal government has secured an extension of funding for vaccine from the Global Alliance for Vaccine and Immunization from 2021 to 2028. The intervention from the organization comes few weeks before the expiration of its 17 years collaboration with Nigeria. Speaking at a news conference, the Minister of Health, Professor Isaac Adewale, says the over $1 billion intervention from the organization will be targeted at vaccine procurement and the strengthening of the health system across the country.
Following the rebasing of our economy, Nigeria rose above the threshold of support from Gavi. And therefore, we must enter into a period of accelerated transition from Gavi support. This implies that federal government of Nigeria will have to progressively increase funding for immunization program in Nigeria and co-financing of vaccines until Nigerian transits completely in 2021 out of Gavi support.
President Muhamed Buhari has tendered an apology on behalf of Nigerians to the family of the presumed winner of the June 12, 1993 presidential election, late Chief Moshood Abiola, and everyone involved in the struggle for the election. President Buhari made the apology at the Special Investiture and National Honours Awards for the late Chief MKO Abiola, his running mate, Ambassador Babagana Kingibe, and the legal luminary, late Chief Gani Fawemi. The president says the recognition is not an attempt to open old wounds, but to right the wrongs of the past, while calling on all Nigerians not to tolerate injustice and also accept the recognition in good faith.
I earnestly invite all Nigerians across all our national divide to accept it in good faith. Our action today is to bury the negative side of June 12. On behalf of the federal government, I tender the nation's apology to the family of late MKO Abiola, who got the highest votes, and to those that lost their loved ones in the cause of June 12 struggle.
A federal high court has sentenced former Governor Joshua Dariye of Plateau State to 14 years imprisonment without an option of fine for criminal breach of trust and misappropriation of 1 billion naira ecological funds belonging to the state government. Justice Olubukola Banjoko convicted the former governor on 15 out of the 23 counts charges preferred against him by the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, while acquitting him on 8 of the charges for want of evidence. The judgment is coming 2 weeks after the same court sentenced the former governor of Taraba State, Reverend Jolly Inyame, to 14 years in prison. The judgment is coming 10 years after Senator Dariye held sway as Governor of Plateau State between May 1999 and May 2007. His trial began on the 15th of July 2007. President Muhammed Buhari has met with governors of the ruling All Progressives Congress at the presidential villa less than 2 weeks to the party's national convention. After the closed-door meeting, the chairman of the APC Governors Forum, Governor Rochas Okorocha of Imo State, says the upcoming national convention and the unity of the party ahead of the 2019 general elections were the focus of the meeting. He told State House correspondents that the crisis in the party is not unusual and all issues are being resolved amicably.
We're getting to the heat of politics, so we just must be prepared for any political issues coming up. But the interesting thing here is that we're more united than ever, so we're ready for election come 2019, and we're sure that people will be proud of the APC's outcome. So we're very fine.
The 2018 budget will be signed by President Muhammad Buhari next week. This was revealed by the Special Advisor to the President on Media and Publicity, Mr. Femi Adesina. Speaking at a news conference after the Federal Executive Council meeting, Mr. Adesina says a specific date would not be disclosed yet, but he gave assurance that the 2018 appropriation bill transmitted to the President by the National Assembly 2 weeks ago will be signed next week.
On the 2018 budget is that it will be signed next week. You will be told the specific day, but the one thing we are sure of is that the budget will be signed next week.
Meanwhile, the Federal Executive Council rose from its weekly meeting with cheery news of the forthcoming repatriation of $500 million loot from the United Kingdom, United States and France to Nigeria. The money was part of huge sums allegedly stolen by the former military president, late General Sani Abacha. Making the disclosure while briefing journalists, the Attorney General of the Federation, Mr. Abubakar Malami, said the move was the fallout of negotiations between the federal government and the three countries.
Nigeria had engaged other countries, inclusive of UK, United States of America, France, JC, among others, in further negotiations relating to repatriation of looted assets. And I'm equally happy to report that we are almost concluding processes relating to repatriation of additional around $500 million, which we hope will be recovered very soon as well. We are at a point where we are trying to come to terms with the U.S. government as to the projects that Nigeria intends to commit the money to.
Ahead of the 2019 general elections, the British government is pledging to provide technical and investigative support to the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission in its bid to stop politicians from buying votes. Speaking at a meeting with the acting chairman of the Anti-Graft Agency, the British High Commissioner to Nigeria, Mr. Paul Oakwright, explains that the fight against corruption requires the holistic collaboration of all Nigerians and international agencies.
We've had a very useful discussion about a number of subjects, some of them operational. We've talked as well about the elections coming up in February 2019 and the importance of the EFCC and INEC as two important independent institutions who are there to help preserve the integrity of the political process here and clearly to take forward investigations without any prejudice on one side or the other, following the evidence and taking action where that is justified. So I'm very pleased to hear your assurance that that is indeed how you're going to continue, as you have already continued your approach here in the FCC. And I have said that we're ready to continue our support, the British government's support, both in technical assistance, in investigations, and of course more broadly in supporting this great independent institution.